NorCal. 209 King of Comedy. It's Rick without the K. James presents, in my opinion, podcast.
I wanted to switch over because I do another podcast with my boy Kabir Singh, right? And
I love Kabir Singh.
and you know he's like my little brother.
He's a great kid, great comic. I hope he fucking wins AGT.
I hope he does too. I think he's.
And did you tell him to text me?
Yes.
And he has not done that yet.
So, because I told him that I was going to be doing this with you, and he goes, "Man, just make sure you get the shot out. Make sure he put something on Instagram for me."
Yeah, that's why I wanted him to send me something because I want to put it on Instagram. But
well, I can show you what he texted me to show you.
well, yeah, just tell him to text me. He has my number.
So,
this shy ass all of a sudden.
And I just find the connection a little funny because we've seen the movie Chef, right? Which you were in. You were the cop, and Sophia was on that movie.
Yeah.
And now Sophia's a judge on America's Got Talent.
Well, it's funny because I did two movies with Sophia, and she's a judge on AGT. Howie Mandel used to be my next door neighbor.
Oh.
So he's a judge on AGT, and I've also known Howie for 32 years since I started doing stand-up.
So how do we buy the other two votes?
I know. Who are the other two? That's why I never called either of them, because I'm like, I don't want to fuck this up for Kabir, because they'll be like, well, he had an influence, and I don't want to.
Which leads me to the question of, and I know you get it all the time because you are the gatekeeper for Indian comics, right? You see a lot of young comics come up, and how does that make you feel? Like now there's Aziz, there's Hassan, there's Kabir, there's Vin.
Well, they say when you start, there's people that will say, how many comedy babies did you spawn? And I've spawned an entire industry of comedy babies.
Oh.
Now, whether some of them want to admit that it was me or not, they may have done it without knowing me, but bottom line is, they weren't doing it when I was doing it. When I started in 1989, these guys, some of them weren't even born yet. I mean, so,
nice.
I gotta pat myself on the back sometimes. But again, I didn't start off thinking I'm an Indian comedian. At the time, there was no points of reference for me. As a matter of fact, when I got into comedy and when I was watching TV when I was a kid, the only people I could identify with were Mexicans.
Really?
They were the only other brown people I saw on TV. So, Paul Rodriguez, I was like, wow, I think he's Indian. And because his last name was Rodriguez, and because of the type of Indian I am, I have cousins whose last name is Fernandez and cousins whose last name is Gonzalez. So I'm like, oh, he might be Indian. And when I saw Eric Estrada, I thought for sure he was Indian. He looks Indian as shit. And I was like, and my dad's name was Eric, so I'm like, well, maybe he's Indian too. And then I didn't know. I genuinely didn't know any Mexicans growing up because there's none in Canada. And I'm a fight fan, so I remember seeing Michael Carbajal in the '88 Olympics, and I remember Carbajal. I didn't know that it was pronounced Carbajal, and I was reading as Carbajal, and I was like, oh, he must be Indian too because he looked fucking Indian. So cut to 32 years later, I've got a half Mexican son because I couldn't tell the difference.
I have a half Mexican, two of them. But, oh, man, I kind of wanted to veer to when
There's another Indian comic, Veer Das. Which is what my dad used to call me. He's like, take your Veer Das out the house. You're too weird for this house.
Do you feel
I'm
like
so glad my jokes are lost on you. I appreciate
Do you feel
that.
like comedy's changing nowadays?
Yeah,
because
I mean,
of the whole PC culture.
I mean, I wouldn't say comedy's changing, but the new generation is not going to be able to do what my generation did, which is good and bad. I mean, it's bad because they don't really have the freedom of speech that we had, but it's good because it challenges them to write in a different way. And everything goes through a change. Everything goes through a shift. Rock and roll doesn't sound like how rock and roll did when it started. Hip hop doesn't sound like how hip hop did when it started. Comedy's not going to sound like how comedy did when it started. So everything has to evolve at some point. And for the older people, it's probably harder than it is for the younger people because we speak in a way that may not be socially acceptable anymore. So we're going to have to play to a different audience.
And I think for myself, that's what's so disconcerting sometimes is I try to lay that out for the audience and let them know, look, I'm over the age of 35. I grew up with Def Comedy Jam.
Oh yeah.
And people think sometimes, meeting other comics, they're like, this is an act, and I'm like, no, this is just me. The culture that I
Yeah.
assume myself in is that hip hop culture, because I don't speak Spanish. I'm Mexican.
You don't
I
speak Spanish?
No.
I fucking speak Spanish.
Most of my friends
That's why I
were
keep
black
saying
growing
Spanish
up,
shit to you,
so-
and I realize there's no reaction. I'm like, I think he's deaf.
and the first 12 years I grew up in El Paso, Texas. So you can't get more Mexican than that, right?
Well,
So,
you can. You could be in Mexico. In all fairness, I mean,
But I look at the comedy scene now, and I'm just like, it's hard for me to write and try to take I saw you last night, and you teeter-totter on both sides. So when you're writing, is that something that you collectively try to?
well, I don't actually sit down and put pen to paper anymore. I just write on stage, and how it comes out is how it comes out, because that's where I want it to be. Because what you write on paper, you write differently than you speak.
Definitely.
You're going to write properly, you're going to speak improperly. So I can't physically write, and then sometimes you overwrite when you write, because you can express yourself a lot better in person. You can't write a facial expression when you're writing something. That's why when I write it on stage, it all happens in one sequence.
So when you're on stage, do you record? Like
I-
you're getting ready? It sounds to me like you're getting ready for another special.
I'm getting ready for another tour, and but I don't record it that often. I probably should, but I don't.
No, everybody, if you guys haven't seen Russell Peters' material lately, man, he shit's fire. So come through, watch his stuff, man. I was
Please
cracking
come
up. Just the fact that, I was telling my son last night, I just the crowd work. I was, because I kind of just do jokes, and then I try to veer off from the crowd work, because I don't know if I'm that safe. Just even this.
How long have you been doing stand-up?
Since 09.
Since 09, so 12 years,
So-
right? 12 years. That's a long time. That's
Like I can handle a heckler.
No.
You know what I mean?
I always say
but-
the incubation period is 10 years. 10 years to figure out who you are. Then the next after that is when you really start doing it. So you're 2 years into really doing it now.
Oh, I definitely believe that. Yeah,
You know what I mean? Because the first 10 years you're kind of meandering your way through. You make mistakes, and that's what you're supposed to do. It's like boxing. It's it's like any fight sport. The beginning you don't really know what you're doing, and as you start to kind of figure it out, you get better at it. And comedy's one of those things. The longer you do it, the better you get at it.
Boy Charlie Murphy, my main man Ric James. That's the one you think, the comedian Ric James. Get up.
I can't hear my neighbor crying, I can't breathe.
Please hit the subscribe button down low so you can see all new clips, all new episodes coming to you.